Okay, first of all, thank you everyone for coming. I am so humbled by the outpouring of support for this project, and I am so grateful for the amazing women who agreed to present today. Each one of them, I'm really excited to hear the tips that they can give me, what I can add to my life, how they can help me deal with the situation that I'm in as well. And I don't want to delay because I know Sarah Eisenman, who is our first speaker, and I am so grateful for her support. She has a plane to catch and she fit us in anyway. So let me just give you a little bit on Sarah Eisman. I don't know how many of you know her. I'm so grateful to have gotten to know her through my participation in the core MMC program. But since our introduction through that, I really feel she's become a trusted mentor and friend. So I'm so grateful that she agreed to give of her time and of her experience here with us today. Sarah Eisman has a lot of letters after her name, but basically she is a clinical therapist and she lives in Oak Park, Michigan. She received her master's degree in social work at Wayne State University over 30 years ago. She's been involved with Jewish Family Services, domestic violence prevention program. She also has a private practice in Brigham Maple Clinic. She always has a strong interest in Jewish women issues, and she's a certified dating coach. Beyond that, she is also, if any of you read Mishpacha magazine, you've seen her there. You see the type of advice, the clear, normal, every person, can accept type of advice that she gives, the straightforward information. And she's currently the director of education at CORE. So without any further ado, Sarah, we'd love to hear what you have to say today.
Thank you, Susie. Thank you so much. And I have such, my heart is just bursting seeing this project come to fruition. I know how much work you've put in it and how much you've grown and expanded everyone who's had the chus of being part of this with you. So thank you for that. I do, it is true, I'm a therapist and all that other good stuff, but today I'm going to speak to you from the heart because I myself am in the same boat of, unfortunately, my mother was nifter a few months ago, but I am still caring for my father as well. And what I speak to you today comes so from a place like been there, done that, been there, doing that. And I just want to start out by giving every single one of you a pat on the back. You know, usually my style is to start off with some kind of cute quip, some kind of a joke about Jewish guilt and Jewish mothers, and would we even be Jewish? Would we even be a mother if we didn't feel guilty? But I will tell you that there's actually nothing funny about guilt. When you're in it, it is so painful, and it takes it kind of sucks the joy and the energy out of everything. So I'm not even going to start with a joke. I'm going to start with acknowledging how complex it is to care for an elderly parent. You know, we were all born and bred on Kavod Savicha V'Simecha, and it's so internalized in all of us. And we appreciate that it's a holy task. There's something incredibly kadosh about doing this work,
Hello. Hello, I'm going to go.
no
But nice to meet
matter
you.
how mundane it
Thank you.
is. But at the same time, it's extremely complex. And I just saw the most gorgeous definition of guilt that I've ever seen before. I said, guilt tells us what we care about. We only feel guilty because it's something that's so important to us. And I think that's a really beautiful reframe because sometimes when we're judging ourselves for this and judging ourselves from that, we have to remind ourselves that it's because this is so important and precious to us that we're struggling with it. And we also have to remember that guilt doesn't necessarily mean we did something wrong. Sometimes it's what happens when love and values and important things come under heavy strain and something gives and there's guilt over there. So there's a few, I'm sure there's the whole, flavor list of guilts that come up, but today we're going to focus on three different topics. One is what I call the feelings about our feelings, right? When we feel of guilt, when we have certain resentments, or we feel overwhelmed, or we feel whatever it is, and then we feel guilty for having those feelings. So that's the feeling squared. And again, like I said, because it's kibbut of aim is so internalized in each one of us as part of our most basic value system. You can imagine that this brings up a lot of emotion. And the guilt comes really when our values come crashing with our human limits. We are only one person, and most of us have multiple realities. So when those things collide, there's some of that guilt. The second guilt we're going to talk about is, I'm sorry, I sort of mixed two things together. The first one is the feelings that we have when we have to set those boundaries. The second is when our roles collide and we can't figure out which role is supposed to be prioritized in that moment. So when those collide and we have guilt over no matter what you do, you feel like you didn't do enough for the other one. And the third one, which I find exceptionally painful, is when we have to make certain decisions and there are consequences for those decisions. And even if they were the right decision, which how do we ever know what that means? There's sometimes consequences that come with that, and there's guilt around that too. So let's start with what is the purpose of guilt, right? HaKadosh Baruch Hu didn't just give us this emotion just to torture us, that's for sure. So why did Hashem put guilt into this world? So, excuse me, in an ideal situation, the purpose of guilt is to alert us that we've done something wrong. So at each point, we have to ask ourselves, have we actually done something wrong? Because there's another guilt, another feeling that feels a lot like guilt. It sits in the same place in our stomach of like, that dread. And that feeling is disappointment. Sometimes when we feel like we've disappointed another person, in the body, in our heart, it feels a lot like guilt. And we have to sort that out. We have to figure out, did we actually do something wrong here, or did we disappoint another person? And particularly if that person is our parent, or maybe it's a sibling who thinks we didn't do enough, or whatever it is, we have to really sort through that. And things, if we want to get complicated, should be complicated. What happens if the relationship with the parent? Well, let's look at the premorbid condition. What if that relation was complicated? What if there was already feelings? What if there was already resentment? What if there was all sorts of stuff between us and the parent? And now when we're doing what we're doing, there's a question of, well, am I not doing enough because I'm really angry at this parent? So things can get intensely complex. And the question that we want to ask ourselves is, first, I need solid hadracha. And I'm so happy because I know many of the women in this group already were zocha to the first part of Susie's program where you literally had Das Torah speak to you about what the parameters are of kibbut av v'em. But once we know the parameters, everything else is kind of gray. There's the things we have to do, and the other stuff becomes our bina. We have to use the bina that we have as women, the discernment of what has to be done now, what doesn't need to be done now, sorting through the feelings, the priorities, and all that. So I think it's very important. I was zocheh to hear a class from Rabbi Gershon Miller a few months ago about the difference between guilt versus shame versus regret. And he quoted the Lubavitcher Rebbe from, I don't know if any of you saw this book that came out called Lessons of Life. And he said the Lubavitcher Rebbe said that when a person feels guilty for having feelings, it's a little bit arrogant. You're a human being. Human beings have feelings. And if you think you're above having feelings, that's a little bit of gaiva on your part. So if we do something or we don't do enough and we feel where we're upset with ourselves, like why am I not why am I resentful? Why am I angry? Why you're angry and resentful because you're a human being. That's how you were created and that's what you're meant to be. And then from that place, that's where we do the growth. So we don't have to have feelings about the feelings. We can relieve ourselves of that piece. We can accept that we're human and we can take our growth from that place. The other thing that we have guilt about is because we often compare ourselves to someone else's madrega. I have either, you could call it the fortune or misfortune, of having a sister-in-law who is so incredibly devoted to my father-in-law. And I have a friend who moved her parents across the street from her. It's like, do you know what it's like comparing myself to these two women? And it's like, what am I doing? They're not me and I'm not them. And there's a beautiful, beautiful in the parsha last week, Moshe Rabbeinu says to HaKadosh Baruch Hu that maybe I should move from here. And HaKadosh Baruch Hu says to him, Vayomer al tikrav halom salna lecha me'al raglecha ki hamakom asher ata omed alav admas kodeshu. No, the place that you're standing right now, that's holy ground. I don't need you to move where your neighbor is, where your sister-in-law is, where your friend is. You have to move, you have to operate from the place where you are right now. And that's where our Nisayon starts where we are. Okay? So we have to understand that boundaries, when we are required to set certain boundaries, they're not a withdrawal of love. Boundaries are what allows the love to endure. Okay? The second form of guilt that we want to talk about is when we have to choose, many of us are in multiple roles. Are we choosing our parent? Are we choosing our husband? Are we choosing our kids? Are we choosing our married kids? Where are we putting ourselves first? And especially for the women out there who are doing this solo, who don't have support, who don't have siblings, who don't have whatever, that question can constantly make us crazy. And we have to remember that the Jewish definition of charata is regret, not guilt. Regret means if I could do it again, I would do it differently. If there's something about this that I need to work on. If you did what was right in that moment, the guilt has no place. And that's like a real cognitive shift. And the third one, this one I find very hard, are the coulda, shoulda, wouldas. We are so blessed to have Das Torah. How lucky are we? We get to call a Rav and put these hard, hard decisions on his shoulders. We get to say, am I supposed to put my mother on dialysis or not? I don't know what to do. And he takes that on his places. He makes that decision based on all the Torah that he's learned. And when we hang up the phone with the Rav, we can say, I did my part. I did what I was supposed to. I asked the Shaila and I followed through. And I'm here to tell you both and. We can do all the right things, and as complex human beings, we can still feel guilty. I will never forget that day that, we were told to put my mother on dialysis, and I knew in the deepest of my heart that it wasn't going to make one hoot of difference. But it was what we were told to do, and it was the pshat, and then it was the psak, and I still, every time I think about it, I just, uh, it hurts. It hurts to put somebody through something that's painful and uncomfortable, and so that's something that, that I still need to work through. But those decisions, and to know that we are so blessed to have that Das Torah. So I'm sorry, I'm not taking way more time than I should be over here, but I want to end with an important tool. Ask yourself the following question. When I thought about this regret that I have, or this guilt that I have, and did it spur me to do something different, to make a change? And did that change make me feel energized? If so, that was appropriate and healthy regret. If all this guilt does is drag me down and make me feel like a terrible person and take me down this shame spiral of I'm not this enough and I'm not that enough, that is anti-Torah. So use that as a gauge, because if it's a healthy regret, it will energize you. If it's not, it will deplete you. Okay, so I thank you, Susie, for the opportunity, and hopefully I will be at the airport in time for questions and answers. And thank you so much for the ability and Tisku Mitzvah. So it should be as close for all of you.
Hey, Sarah, thank you so much. You packed a lot of information into a very small time, and I really appreciate it. Obviously, each one of these issues, there is place to expand, and I'm hoping as my project develops, even to a larger degree, we're gonna, delve into each one of these things on a deeper level. So thank you very much, and have a safe flight. I just wanted to take a second. I would love if, to dedicate this program, Ilu Nishmat, my father, Avram Svi Ben Chaim Menachem. His yard site, his Yom Tira was 2 days ago on Kaf Tevet. And He really taught me what it means to embrace the mitzvah of kibbud av v'em in two ways. Number one, he showed me in Maaseh and what he did with his parents, with his mother, and with my mother's mother, how he cared for them personally. He also, after they passed, kept him alive within our family, the way he spoke about his parents with such kavod. And in the end, he allowed his children to do the mitzvah. And I see from some of the feedback and some of the questions that I'm getting from people, it's not so, it's not always common. Sometimes it's hard for the parent to take that step back and say, I'm no longer capable of doing certain things by myself. And I'm inviting my children in and I'm embracing them and helping them to do this mitzvah. So I just wanted to thank him for that. And I understand that it's not such common. It's hard for somebody getting old, as well as it's a little bit difficult for us to change those roles. The next speaker, and I am so honored to have her here, Rebbetzin Yehuda Skolshevsky. Some of you may know her, and this may be a first time interaction with her for some of you. She's a distinguished Torah educator and spiritual mentor, and she's based in Yerushalayim, so I'm grateful to have her here locally. She's a founder and director of Shiviti, which is a women's education network that offers immersive Torah study with a focus on Hasidic teachings. So it has that Hasidic spin to it, which really speaks to the heart. In my opinion, speaks to the neshama, speaks to the heart. She has over 30 years experience teaching in Israel and internationally. And she prioritizes embracing and supporting women in their leadership roles in the community and to help give them the sources and the backing in order to do that. She serves as supervisor of the Core Mashpia Mentor Counselor, the MMC program, and that's where I met her. And we're so grateful to have her here.
Susie, thank you so much for inviting me. This mitzvah is very deeply beloved to me. Not only kibbud av v'em in general, but especially the caring for parents as they age. My mother and I shared the care for my father, Zichron Livracha, before he passed away several years ago. He had been ill for quite a long time. And in addition, this is something actually, when you asked me about what to say ahead, I forgot that for like 15 years, my husband and I wrote curriculum materials for Project Derech. I don't know if people are familiar with it. The Kibbud Av V'em and Kavod V'mora Horim V'morim program that came out of Toronto that was used in so many schools. So my husband and I worked with them for many years, writing curriculum material for them for the boys' schools and the girls' schools and so on. So like this is a mitzvah that we are, and you know, as a family and also in our learning and teaching, was really a very big focus for a long time. Aside from personal connection with the mitzvah and great love for this mitzvah. Now, when Susie asked me to participate, she said, "What do you want to speak about?" And my usual answer is, "Well, what do you need to have spoken about?" Because to my mind, it doesn't make that much of a difference. I'm happy to do the thing that nobody else wants to do. And so I received the thing that probably nobody else wants to do, which is to talk about kibbud horim with abusive parents. Now, I know I'm not going to talk too much. I don't think I'm going to go in too much to halachic matters. It will touch upon some, but overall, hashkafa and chizuk. Now, I didn't ask Susie for how she was defining abusive parents because, as far as I can tell, there's really two different dimensions to this, which is parents who were historically abusive and parents who, through their compromised health and situation, become abusive. And of course, those two circles can sort of overlap as well, unfortunately, because the parent who has been historically abusive can often be that behavior can be exacerbated also due to their compromised situation. Now, in addition, I want to, before I start, acknowledge that this is an extremely sensitive subject. it's very likely that what I say is going to, touch on sensitive spots for people. And so I'm asking Mechila Merosh, I'm really going to try my best to touch, to talk about this in as sensitive a way as I can and as carefully as I can. Because, of course, we also have to start with the definition of how we define abusive, right? Like the language of abusive can run the range from truly egregious behavior all the way to challenging and difficult and emotionally straining or physically straining. Okay, so we have to also, I think, start with an understanding that the very definition of abusive has quite a spectrum around, is very personal. Okay, that's number one. Now, Rabbi Yochanan says in the Gemara, he was a Yasum, and he said, Ashrei mi shelo roa es aviv es imo. As a Yasum, he was an orphan. He was orphaned from his father when he was conceived. He was orphaned from his mother when he was born. He said, fortunate is the person who never saw his father and his mother. Now, obviously, he didn't mean that it's preferable to be an orphan, but through this kind of, I would say, kind of a limud zchus on the possible upside to be seen in having been an orphan, was that he was acknowledging the great challenge that can sometimes go along, the various challenges that can go along with fulfilling the mitzvahs of kibbud av v'em. Now, if we look to our sources in the Talmud, if we look in the Gemara and Kiddushin and so on, that's where Daf Lamed, Lamed Aleph, we have a lot of basic ideas about the mitzvah of kibbud av v'em, which of course is carried over into Shulchan Aruch and Poskim and so on. It's discussed in Rishonim. So probably, like Sarah said before, like these are the kinds of stories that we grew up on, presumably. We might have grown up on them, well, if you haven't, you haven't. About Benesina, about the Gemaras about it says in Shulchan Aruch that even if a person is sitting in a place of kavod and wearing the big day chamudos, and we have examples of someone who was in such a situation, and his mother came and she acted and she acted in a wild way and caused him a lot of shame and humiliation and loss and financial loss and so on. Ad heichan kibbud av v'em, right? That's the language of Shulchan Aruch, Ad heichan. And so it's one thing to read it inside of a sefer. It's one thing to hear it in a shiur, but it's another entirely to be faced with a situation that actually sounds a lot like what Chazal were talking about when they said, how far does this mitzvah go? And so at the further extreme of what is required of children, it's the heroic standard, we'll call it, the heroic standard vis-a-vis kibbud av v'em is quite clear, right, in Shulchan Aruch. Now, the question that many people will have is, well, what about me? The idea of, well, how am I supposed to safeguard myself? Like, I may have obligations toward my parents, but they're he, she, one or the other or both. It's a difficult situation that I have paid for either historically heavily, or if it's could be that it's a function of, as you say, a kind of increasing compromised situation where a parent who may not have been abusive historically can be abusive because of dementia, because of just their deteriorating physical condition. They don't have the capacity anymore to be patient, to be polite. They can be harsh. So there's like two different sides to this, which is there's the obligatory part of it, right? There's the question of like, what is my obligation? And those are halachic considerations. And of course, and each of those detailed halachic considerations, I highly recommend that especially when the emotional temperature in the relationship is difficult, and either there is historical abuse or there is current abusive treatment. So that's something that really can use the negotiation, the navigation with a competent Rav. Okay, so obviously these are areas of very deep shilas that really do need to be asked. But I wasn't, asked to talk today about like the halachic parameters. We just understand that halachically there is a kind of balancing out between what are our obligations, ad heichan, how far do they go, and how far goes our requirement to preserve our own emotional health and safety and sanity. Okay, and I'm saying that I'm using kind of strong language, but these can be very difficult circumstances, and it's especially challenging when a parent is really dependent on the aid of a child who's being put into and has been in the past and perhaps only currently, whatever the particular situation is, where the child is really being put to a very great test of their capacity to care for a parent who either has been historically abusive or is currently abusive to them. So we have to see like this sort of balance between ad heichan, how far do my obligations go? And then also, what do I have the capacity for? And those are halachic considerations. And we do find that the poskim are clear. Sometimes the situation can be so difficult that the only recourse that a child has is to appoint a shaliach to care for their parent because they cannot do it themselves. Whether it's because it's too physically onerous or because emotionally it's impossible for them, there can be a lot of different reasons why. But the kind of the arc of what help do I need to be able to navigate through this? Can I navigate through this? How am I supposed to understand why did Hashem like put me in this situation, right? Why am I in this situation? So I think I want to address that first because the halachic ramifications obviously have to be addressed halachically, and that's with a Rav. But let's think about the mitzvah of kibbud av v'em altogether. Okay, there's two basic ways that we think about kibbud av v'em. It has what we call a sichli component to it, meaning there's a certain kind of logic to the mitzvah of kibbud av v'em, which is like at root. I don't know if I'm always careful if someone doesn't have their mic off, that someone is going to say something private and other people are going to hear it. So I just recommend that it should be off. So the so the logical component, right, is I probably we're mostly familiar with the idea of like it basically has to do with hakaras hatov. It basically has to do with the fact that there is something, even with a historically abusive relationship, there is some point or points that I can focus on as a child, an adult child, doesn't matter, that I can focus on for which I do have genuine gratitude to my parents or my parent, the abusive parent, the currently abusive, the formerly abusive, etc. And so that's sort of sitting there as the sichli component. That's the logical component that doesn't go away, even if the situation itself is too difficult for me to bear. That still remains kind of underlying the place of my obligation. Now, there's a lot of halachic ways in which this is addressed, like how far does a parent go before the obligation is sort of undermined. And I don't want to go there because it's actually, I don't think it's helpful to most people. Like here we are, a group of women who really do want to be mischazik. Like in my particular case, I didn't have, like I didn't have the situation of my father being an abusive person. And so the care for him I don't want to say exactly a pleasure, but it kind of was. It kind of was. Now that doesn't mean that historically we didn't have stuff, because very often parents and children have stuff. But there is a reason why Rav Chaim Pelagi, who was like, one of the great Chachamim, why he said that the truth is, like, the mitzvah of kibbud av v'em in what he would call the normative circumstance, like, that's the easy part. Even when it's demanding, even when it's hard for us, even when it's physically demanding, financially demanding, energetically demanding, time demanding, but that's the part that emotionally is not difficult for us. Right? It can be emotionally difficult because, like Sarah said, we might feel like we need to have done more. We might feel like we're not doing enough. We might feel that it's just hard to be caring for a parent who's ailing. Those are all emotionally difficult. But in terms of just doing, it doesn't necessarily have to be that with that much of a strain of willingness. But when it comes to the parent with whom I have an abusive, either historically abusive relationship or currently abusive relationship, that's where Rav Chaim Pelagi says that's actually where the focus of this mitzvah is. Meaning the mitzvah would be otherwise sichli, for the parent with whom you have a good relationship, who's done so much for you throughout your life, with whom you have deep bonds of affection, even when there's strain and it's very challenging, the basis, the foundation is really in place. And so that's not where you need a commandment. The commandment is really for the places where it's really challenging for us. And then we find ourselves held, meaning held to the mitzvah, even if we don't have that much willingness to do the mitzvah. Now, there's also the chuki aspect of it, which is it's a chok, and it is. But to be able to understand it a little bit more deeply, I want to explore that a little bit. Now, the chok aspect of it is that there are halachos of kibbud av v'em. There are situations where you would think that a child doesn't have an obligation. And I will give you an example. Okay. Now this is quite an extreme example. I chose one purposefully. That's a very extreme example. If anybody wants, I have dozens of pages of Shayos and Shuvas from Rav Zilberstein's, Rav Yitzchak Zilberstein's shiurim for doctors. He has volumes and volumes of the classes that he gives for doctors in Israel. So his son-in-law, Rav Elyashiv, Zichron Livracha. Anyway, Rav Zilberstein, these shiurim are very, very thorough. And in one of them, he addresses a question that was asked to him about a boy, a young man, who, when he was in utero, his mother, because he had, they diagnosed that he had hydrocephaly, which means like a water on the brain, and which was going to be, that was predicted by the doctor to be problematic for this child and so on. The mother elected to abort. The doctor supported doing an abortion. And and he attempted to do one. And he erred. And he only vacuumed, he only aspirated water. And the child lived. The child lived. And the child was sent out for foster care. And the question that came back after this child grew up was, does he still have a chiyuv of kibbud av v'em for the mother who tried to kill him and who failed? So it's an interesting question. It's a difficult question. What is his chiyuv towards his mother? So Rav Zilberstein said something very powerful. He said, he brought a medrash. It says in Bereishis Rabbah that Avram Avinu received word from HaKadosh Baruch Hu that he is pater from kibbud av, but others are not pater. And what's really going on there is that it's because his father was mafkir him to death. His father Terach abandoned him to death, and so he has no obligation in kibbud av. But the medrash goes on to say others do have an obligation. And Rav Zilberstein, in bringing this, he explains it at great depth, that I can't go into all of his reasoning. But he points out something very powerful. He says, if we're going to look at it only logically, we would say, like, she was mafkir him. It's like she's not his mother. And that's the most extreme example we could bring, probably, of not having a need for hakaras hatov to a parent, I think. That's why I chose it. At the same time, he said, but the chok nature of kibbud av v'em still stays. And so, even though we could understand if he can't bring himself to be mechabed his mother, there's still something there that remains. Now, Ibn Ezra points out that, that on Aseres HaDibros, so both luchos, the luchos face each other. And each of those dibros, they match each other. Anochi matches lo sirtach. Lo yelecha matches lo sinaf, and so on. Until you get to the bottom of the luchos. At the bottom of the luchos, we have kabed es avicha v'esimecha, which faces lo sachmod. Honoring parents has some kind of a conceptual relationship with not wanting what belongs to another. Now, the Ibn Ezra has a very powerful explanation there. He says lo sachmod is about acceptance of hashgacha. that HaKadosh Baruch Hu, if I really accept that, like I don't have a wife, but that my wife is my wife, and my house is my house, and my animal is my animal, and my life is my life, basically. That the life that I have is my life, and it was given to me by HaKadosh Baruch Hu, and all the circumstances of my life, that's what I have. And what belongs to Yena, like what belongs to the other, their story, their life, their story, is not mine. And they've got nothing to do with each other. And then we reflect that back to Kabed Asavicha V'Asimecha. And when it's reflected back, what's the relationship between the two? And here I'm begging everybody to please understand that I mean this to be chizuk, not to be an indictment on anybody. Okay? Is that our parents are our parents. And this is the life that HaKadosh Baruch Hu gave us. And that's the chok aspect, in a certain sense, of this mitzvah, is that we have the parents that we have. Now, it's possible, that there can be circumstances where it is necessary, like it says in halacha, it's halachic matter. If you can't do it, you can't do it. If you can't do it, you can't do it. If you need to undergo therapeutic help in order to be able to continue to do this mitzvah, that's what you do. There are even discussions about like digging up. Are you allowed in therapy to dig up all the stuff that makes it so difficult in this relationship? Like, is that also a problem of kibud av v'em? And Rova Poskim, they say, even when you got to work stuff out, if my intention is not that I'm trying to disassociate, but that maybe I need a little distance, or I have to protect myself in order to be able to have as much of a rectified relationship as it's possible with my parent. So then there is room for many kinds of therapeutic interventions, which on the surface might look like it would be problematic. And so, I think that overall, and I probably have to stop already, right, Susie? Okay. So I couldn't remember like what the timing was, and I can't even see what time it is. Okay. So just like one last word, all right? I think that when it comes to situations that anybody would label according to their own internal labeling system, it's your own metric, right? But if a person labels this relationship as being one that's typified by abuse, historically, currently, or both, then we have halachic questions that need to be asked. We have a lot of self-assessment that we need to do. Is this a mitzvah that I can do? What can I do? Do I want to do? Do I need to enlist other sources of assistance and support in order to be able to do? And in some circumstances, must I step away? Those are occasionally the answers. Sometimes it does mean step away. It can mean to enlist someone else's help. The range of possibilities halachically here is too broad to be able to come to any particular conclusion. However, I think overall, the pathway that seems to me is to remember life is about fixing. We're here to be masakin. We're here to fix. In as much as it's possible to fix relationships. And again, the fixing sometimes is only to come to the place of acceptance. This is my parent. I will do my best. I will stop when I cannot do. I will seek halachic guidance in order to help me navigate situations that are challenging for me. But I accept I accept that this is my life. This is the story. And I am not trying to, I'm letting go of the fantasy parent and dealing with the actual parent in whatever way I can. Okay. And forgive me if I stepped on anybody's toes.
Rebbetzin Golshevsky, Yehudis, thank you so, so much. Very informative. I know that a lot of people did send in questions in this area, and I hope that we'll also have some videos in the future that will help with, this in more in depth, maybe with a Rav to give us some guidance and counseling. I just also wanted to make recognition of Mrs. Yehuda Samet. She wrote this book, My Father, My Mother, and Me. I had a very nice conversation with her several weeks ago, and one thing that she asked me to bring up is the idea that for most people, just like Yehudis was saying, most people, the mitzvah of kibbud av va'em is so closely related to the idea of hakarat hatov. And when we have hakarat hatov for our parents, it's also to Hashem, because there are three elements that create us. And when we say that it's, when people have difficulty or they really don't feel that desire of hakarat hatov, that's when we lean on the fact that the mitzvah of kibbud av va'em, and this is on our video with Rav Leff, that the mitzvah of kibbud av va'em was actually given in the midbar, where our parents were not clothing us, were not feeding us, were not teaching us, were not sheltering us, nothing. And that's where the mitzvah was actually given to us. So when you really don't have that feeling, we really are doing it more in Hakaras Hatov for Kadosh Baruch Hu. Okay, so our next up is Rebbetzin Rina Shochet. She's lived such a remarkable life, and in so many places around the world that it's hard to believe that any of you have not seen her or heard of her in the past. Her formative years were in seminary in Bnei Brak. She then went on to high school teaching and coaching and adult education. She blends teaching, guiding, and supporting others as part of her way of supporting Jewish women. She lived in Baltimore, she lived in Canada, she lived in Johannesburg, North Carolina, Las Vegas, Jacksonville. She was part of the Chevra Kadisha, and she does coaching work now. She's also a graduate of the MMC program. So without further ado, Rebbetzin Rina Shochet.
Thank you so much. And thank you, Rebbetzin Golshevsky. That was such a beautiful presentation. I'm going to be speaking about siblings and how siblings can grow together from this very, very difficult situation. We were very fortunate. Our mother was 104 years old when she was nifter 6 weeks ago. So you'll have to excuse me because I'm still very emotional about it, as you can hear. But it was very, very important to us because our mother wanted us to be at one with one another, always to be at one with one another. Well, that's an idyllic situation. It doesn't always happen, but there are many ways in which siblings can be joined together in caring for aged parents. And my family and I have been through this, and I'm going to share some of these with me. So mine is not so much a halachic component, but it's a practical component. And it's also something that we as MMCs can help others to do with their parents when they come into the stage that we're talking about now. So things aren't really always as they seem during a crisis. Sometimes there are decisions that have to be made that are very, very highly charged, and in which words are arrows that are actually penetrating into one's chest like someone has thrown you down. Members of the family have different opinions, and they try to come to a final decision that can be difficult. So allow me, please, to use my personal experience that you can then use for yourselves as well. When my mother was in a very bad state after Rosh Hashanah and between Rosh Hashanah and Yom Kippur, one of our siblings said, "Mom, my house is your house." Now, that was huge. She was discharged from the hospital. Her health took a downward turn. By this time, because the sibling was going to be housing our mother, the hospice was brought in, and hospice can be very anti-halachic. And so one has to be very, 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 it makes a big impression on one. So my mother had a hospice bed. She even had this rolling chair And every so often, the aides would come and take her into the kitchen so that she would be seeing people. And for this, we were, of course, all on one level. We agreed with this. But as time went on, she began to, her throat closed. We didn't realize it, but her throat closed and she wasn't eating anymore. She would refuse to eat. No matter how much we would try to spoon feed her, she just refused to eat. And hospice came and said, well, this is a dying process. And we asked our own personal, each of us, we're 4 siblings, each of us asked our own personal Rabbanim, what do we do? And the answer came back, you never let someone starve. What we didn't realize was that we were starving our mother. And so we had a very wonderful physician who came in and said, yes, she should be having hydration. When the hydration started, she began to pick up again, but then had terrible headaches. And so I remembered that when my mother fasted, she always used to get terrible headaches. The doctor was then told, okay, she's not getting nutrition. He said, no, she must have nutrition. But then some siblings felt that if she's going to have that nutrition, is this going to be worse for her? Are we prolonging her life? Are we torturing her? What are we doing? And we were at odds with one another. Once again, if we had an MMC helping us, we would have said, go and talk to your own Rav and bring your ideas together and discuss them with one another. Our mother was always very, very strong on be together. One sibling became so irate that they packed up and went home, which was quite a ways away. I'm going to make it very nebulous because I don't want anybody to know if it was a male sibling or a female sibling. That doesn't matter. It was a sibling. And the sibling remained angry. And different siblings would call and say, you know, you left in a huff. Maybe it would be a good idea if you were to come back. That sibling did so. The sibling came back. And the one thing that we said when we sat down, the sibling said to us, and we were the 4 of us together with our spouses, the sibling said, I came for one reason. I came that we should be on the same page. And even if we're not on the same exact page, at least we will hear one another out and not be angry with one another. And that was what we planned to do. And that was what we did. It was not easy. Different siblings' spouses were very, very angry with us and said, how can you do this to your mother? Another friend whose parent was in that same stage called their Rav, and their Rav said to them, whatever you do, there are 2 things you must adhere to. Number 1, you don't starve your parent. And number 2, you stay together. Whatever it is, you discuss it with one another. Take down the emotion. Keep yourselves on that same line to hear one another. Yes, you might have an outburst. One person might say, I don't care what halacha says, my mother is suffering, so I'm going to do. And then calm down and say, I'm sorry, that was an outburst. I feel badly. Have that in mind with one another. Be able to say, I forgive you. I understand what you're feeling. I don't agree, but let's talk about it. Let's not let this become a rivalry between us or between our spouses, our respective spouses. Because of that dissension that we had with one another, because one sibling had gone home, we understood that we had to stay on the same page. Was it easy? No one promised us easy. This is not an easy time for us. This is a time of emotion. If we are looking at this from the standpoint of MMCs, be there for whoever your client is so that you can help them through it. If it's you yourself, then you say to yourself also, let me think, let me put myself in my sibling's position. Let me think through how my sibling is feeling and what I would be hurt if I said and what would help by what I say. When the time came and we had the zechut of sitting at our mother's bedside, and as the day progressed, she started with stertorous breathing. It was hurtful to be sitting at her side, but each of us came to be there with her, to hold her hand, to say to her, Mommy, I'm here. I'm with you. You can hear me. And as the day went on, as the time went on, sorry, I'm choking up because I'm reliving it. But as the time went on, so her breathing became easier. And then, as we were sitting there, and as we were speaking to her, as we were singing Tehillim to her, because she loved Tehillim, we saw that she was taking breaths more and more shallowly. And then the aide said to us, she's gone. After our shloshim, we decided that we had to clear our mother's apartment. Each sibling had a different experience and a different sentiment regarding her possessions, because now that's all we have of her except what's in our minds. And at that stage, we're no longer caring for our mother, but we realize that we have to care for one another. Each of us had a different way in which we considered what objects and possessions should be saved and which would have to go. Just before I sat down to think about how I was going to present this to you, I received a phone call. My sibling and I had been through taking care of my mother's possessions, and the sibling who would periodically come and care for Mom thought that she had or he had the most to say because it was one of our male siblings and one of our female siblings who were always there with her. We were talking about what gemach, what should we do? I knew that I was leaving town, so my sibling was also leaving town, and we had to make a decision as to what should be kept and what we should dispose of. I felt it was important to sort things out before I left for home. What I didn't realize was that this one sibling had spent so much more time with Mom when Mom was in her apartment that this sibling had to say goodbye to the possessions as well as to our mother. And that was an important thing. Be careful. Be thoughtful. Keep eyes and ears open, because what might not be important to me is my sibling's way of saying goodbye to our mother. As I was about to pick up the phone to apologize to the sibling whom I had just spoken very harshly to, the phone rang. It was just after Shabbos, and my sibling said to me, "You know what? In this new light of day, in this new week, I want to ask you for mechila." I had the phone in my hand wanting to ask that sibling for mechila. And that's what we need to do. As people who are going through it ourselves with our family, as people who are being MMCs and helping others out of this situation, my practical advice is listen carefully to one another. If you have to have harsh words, I'm your MMC. Give it a try to me and let's talk about it so that when you come to your sibling or your sibling's other, you're able to speak in a way that they can hear and that you can hear. Mine is more practical, not halachic practical necessarily, but practical. Having been through it and it's not easy. It's not easy, but you should have hatzlacha in helping people to come to recognize how important the family relationships must be to us as people and to MMCs in what we do. Thank you for giving me this opportunity.
Thank you, Rebbetzin Shochat. Really, really helpful and really hits home for a lot of us. I just want to say we did get several requests in for how to tackle the sibling situation and how to share the responsibility. So your story is very inspiring. Not everybody here are MMCs in training or anything like that. Many of us are. So for those of you, somebody just asked, what is an MMC? It's a must be a mentor counselor. It's a program that many of the women here on this Zoom today are a part of. But your advice is good across the board, so very much appreciated. And Bezrat Hashem, everyone should have a tzlacha in this area. I am now going to call on Orly Salmon. I met Orly through a program that I went to, a support program that I went through at Yad Sarah here in Israel. Orly did not give me much to say about her, but we became friends through that process. She has a lot of experience running support groups for people who are caring for their elderly parents. And she has tremendous words of wisdom that I hope will help all of us. Orly. Your mic is on mute.
Is this okay? Can you hear me?
Yes, perfect,
Okay.
Orly. Thank you.
Great. Okay. So hi, everybody. First of all, Susie, this is a real privilege to be a part of this because I really, really believe in support groups, especially for women. This process of caring for parents is very difficult for most people because it's in the middle of life, another issue is coming up. And I actually go to the practical side. I try to help people figure out ways to help themselves through the process. We call this little few minutes caring without losing myself. I would like to share with you some practical ideas how to do that because it's not easy. So I'll start just by saying that I call my support groups Mifgeshei Or, meetings of light, not only because my name is Orly, but because I really, really believe that we women need to see a little bit of light along the way of this very difficult path. Sometimes it's sad, sometimes it's frustrating. We need to see little light, and we can't allow ourselves to lose ourselves while going through the process. My directives in these support groups is I would like everybody to try to actually accomplish Kibud Av V'Em at its best, to do the exact Kibud Av V'Em that they must do for their parents. But on the other hand, breathe, survive this passage. If somebody's experiencing a parent in dementia, it could be 15 years of this. So we have to learn some ways to breathe through the process. So I would like to demonstrate to you in 2 minutes how I start my support groups, because I think it really shows what we're feeling as we do this. Of course, every story is very individualistic, but in general, women, middle age, pretty much experience the same experiences. Okay, so let me introduce myself with my many hats. And each one obviously can do this at home with herself. I really believe in writing things down. So I'm going to introduce myself. Stay with me for 2 minutes. My name is Orly, and I have a hat that I'm a wife. I'm a mother of 6 kids. I'm a sister of brothers that are abroad. Just switch to that. I'm a Jew, which is very meaningful these days. I'm trying to get the camera on this. I'm a Jew, which is a very meaningful hat these days in Israel, of course. I'm an Israeli, which is another hat. 1 second. I have a hat of a business lady. I have a hat of a cook of the house. I'm a Shabbos maker. I am a minister of entertainment. Whoa. I'm the vacation planner. I am a friend of few people. I'm a neighbor. I take care of the bills. These are a lot of hats that I have. But the biggest hat that I have is being a daughter of elderly parents for 17 years. My father was sick just with old age, and my mother for 10 years had dementia. So with all the hats that I had, and all of you also have, the biggest hat that I ever had was the heaviest hat, was taking care of my parents. This hat is the heaviest because it's emotional and technical at the same time. It's very, very easy to lose yourself in all these responsibilities and obligations, and it's a real cause for frustration and sadness, fatigue, lack of energy, lack of motivation. You can run into addictions, lack of sleep. We have to be aware of the fact that we, in this middle stage of life, we're carrying a lot of heaviness on our shoulders. So how do we care for our parents the best way without losing ourselves? Many times women that come to my groups are already not breathing. So we have to find the little steps of how to find ourselves while taking care of our parents. So I would like to give you the tip that works for many, many women that I help. I ask everybody to try to take an hour to sit down with a nice cup of coffee, 2 pieces of paper in front of you. On 1 piece of paper, please write all the musts in the care for your parents. What are those things that we must do in order to do Kibud Av V'Em the best way, and also to take care of them physically and emotionally? And I'll give you an example. This list would include, my father needs 5 small meals a day. My father needs a shower every other day. My parent needs the medication 3 times a day. He needs the diaper change 7 times a day. He needs to go out of the house a minimum of once a week, and so on and so forth. Doctors, x-rays, medical pedicure. There are certain things that are a must. This list is a list that we all must do. We cannot avoid taking responsibility for this list. We either do it ourselves, or we split it between our siblings, or we use all the systems that are available for us. Volunteers. Today, there's lots of organizations that can help out, caregivers, but we have to find a way, because we are not allowed, we cannot afford not to take care of our parents in the right way. So that's the one list. It allows you to later on say, I took care of my parent. The other piece of paper, and is just as important, needs to include a list of all those things that you would like to do for your parents out of the goodness of your heart. And I'll give you examples. I would love my parent to have home-baked cake every week. I would like my parent to go out to concerts or to a coffee shop a few times a week. I would like to take my mother out to the park with the grandkids. These are all things that I would like to do. Do I have to do them? No. Are they a must? No. By the way, for some people, they might be a must. But in general, these are luxuries. These are things that I do out of the goodness of my heart. These two lists allow me to, on one hand, take care of my parent and know that I did my responsibility. And on the other hand, also give myself a pat on the back. I'm also giving out of love. I'm giving extra. I'm doing more than I have to. Why is it so important to have these two lists? The first reason is, and I see it as a real important idea, we've got to have boundaries when we take care of our parents. We have to not underdo, and we cannot overdo. We have to be able to know what is needed, what is necessary, and then let go. The reason we need to do the extra, the list out of the goodness of our heart, is also to feel our relationship to our parents, to feel that we're doing a little bit extra. My intention is that at the end of this long, long path, we will reach our parents' 120th. Number one, feeling that we did the best that we could. Not to have any guilt feelings, or maybe just a little guilt feelings, but not a lot of guilt feelings about the way we took care of them. These boundaries are very, very important for us, because once we understand what we have to do, what we're doing is extra, then we can also find time for ourselves. And that's the name of the lecture, Caring Without Losing Myself. In order to be a good caregiver, I must exercise. I must go to a shiur once in a while. I must have time to be with my children, with my spouse, take a little bit of a break, read a book. Small things, little things. So I really recommend for everybody who's actually in the passage right now of taking care of parents, please give yourself an hour to sit down and realize what it is that you're doing with your parents, how you're taking care of them, and use support systems from all around. I would like to conclude what my thoughts are by saying that it's very, very important to be the daughter of our parents, not only the caregiver. I believe some of our parents, if it's not sicknesses like dementia, our parents would like to see their daughters happy, successful, busy with their own family, having their own nachas. We must be able to continue being a daughter of, which means going to my parents, sitting down and having a cup of coffee with my father or mother, having a conversation, joking around a little bit. And if somebody has not such a great relationship from the past, it's an opportunity while our parents are a little doing a little less well to maybe spend time and renew relationship. But it's very, very important that I don't lose myself. I don't lose this hat that is called a daughter. I'm not only a caregiver. More tips to come. Thank you.
Orly, thank you. Orly has totally, she educated me. I went to her, she gave sessions in Yad Sarah, and they were remarkable. I made the time to go, and I learned so much from her. She's now a trusted friend. So thank you very much, and thank you for your time here today, Orly. Okay, and last but not least, we're going to talk about couplehood with Leora Mendel. So Leora, let me just get my papers in order. Okay, Leora Mendel is a teacher, therapist, and mother of four, a wife as well. She was trained as a professional counselor and marriage and family therapist in the U.S. She works in Yerushalayim with individuals, couples, and families. Leora has a passion for teaching Torah, and I've benefited from those teachings myself. She gives tools on how to apply Torah lessons to practically change lives for the better. So, Leora, we'd love to hear what you have to share.
So my topic of supporting marriage through supporting your parents is really an incredible follow-up to Orly, because Orly, when you give the list of what must be done to take care of your parent, what would be nice to do to take care of your parent, and what I need to do for myself, I think a lot of times when you gave that image of all those hats, it helps us really understand and validates how overwhelming and challenging it is to fit all of this into one basket. But now I'm adding another piece and part, and you can wonder, where is space for the marriage in all of this? Because I'm sure many women are even having a challenging time finding where's the space for myself. And you gave such incredible tools to try to organize some space within the limited amount of time, resources, and energy that we have. So I want to remind everybody that very likely at this stage of life, your marriage has gone through some times where it's gone through some strain. It might have been early on when you were a young mother. It could have been a pregnancy. You're having young children that have needs. It could have been an illness. There's some sort of a challenging time you've gone through in your relationship. Most likely, you've gone through that already. And it can be helpful now to sort of reflect back and think about, how did I get through that other situation, that other time in life where, yes, my marriage did feel like it went through a strain. What helped? What was a challenge? What can I learn from it? And also remember that sometimes when we're in a situation, it feels like it's so ongoing. But at some point, if you look back in time, you'll realize there was that time period and then we phased out of it. How did we get out of it? How did we transition? How did we rebuild? It's always very helpful to look back on what you've already experienced and think about how it can be helpful for right now. But something I want to give a few practical ideas, because in this we have both the caregiver and we have what I call the support person in the relationship. And in both sides of this, there's really important things to consider and some points I'd like to share that might really make a big difference. I think a lot of times when we're in an overwhelming situation, especially in a situation like this where so many hats, I love that image, Orly, right? There's so much on my plate. It's so overwhelming. There's so many things I start thinking about what I cannot do. I don't have time. I can't. And the challenge with thinking about what I can't do in my marriage, right, in my relationship for myself, is that it sort of puts a block. All I see in front of my eyes is what I can't do. And so even though I'm not trying to minimize the fact that there might be a lot of limitations on what you would like to do and what you actually can do, it really makes such a big difference to switch the thinking of, well, what can I do? It's a mind shift that really helps me. Instead of getting overwhelmed by what I can't do, it helps me see potential possibilities. And a lot of times, just that mind shift, things start to open up. And again, it's pulling back all the things I can't do to starting to see, what can I do? It opens up some space to start to really see, what can I do? What's possible in this situation? I want to say too, especially if you're the caregiver and you're finding that there's strain on your relationship and your marriage, this may sound sort of like, well, obvious, but I think we oftentimes don't do this, and it makes such a difference, is to have a conversation with your spouse where you share how much you'd like to be there more, how much you'd like to be able to invest more in the relationship. because sometimes I think we just will assume the other person, well, they should know that, they do know that, they see how overwhelmed I am. But it's incredible how, especially if the other person might be feeling a bit of a strain, really feeling you're not present as much, just sharing the desire that you have to have more time to be with your spouse can really make such a big difference. Another important point is that, and again, I keep going back to Orly's list, right, of prioritizing. If you've been married for a long time, everyone's at different stages in relationships. Some people might be in newer relationships and caring for parents. Some people might be in longer term relationships and caring for parents. I think the challenge with the longer term relationship is sometimes we sort of start making assumptions. We know each other very well. My husband knows what I need. I know what he needs. And we don't sometimes have these conversations. But as Orly was pointing out, that there's so many things that are on our to-do list, and there isn't enough time for ourselves, let alone sometimes for our marriage. And I may recognize that my marriage is under strain. I just don't have time to do all the things that I know would be important for my spouse. It's really important to have the conversation of asking your spouse. Again, you can share, I have so much on my plate right now. I really, though, want to make some effort. Tell me what's important to you. Where should I put my effort? Now, the reason I'm saying this is, again, many of you might feel like, well, I know that already. So that might be true. First of all, you might be surprised if you ask. It might be different than you think. But even if you hear from your spouse exactly what you know, okay? Let's say for them, having time to sit down with you to have dinner is more important than anything else. They don't care if the house is a mess. To you, then what's important is time with you when it's time for dinner. Let's say you know that, and let's say that's what they share. Just you're asking that question, it reminds them and gives the message is I want to make the effort. I care about you. I'm trying to prioritize what's important to you. And so when they share that and then they see that you do it, there's times where we do things for each other and it's not appreciated. It happens like in both directions of the spouse. And in a sense, if my spouse does something for me and I don't fully appreciate it as a giving gesture, to some degree, some of the benefits of that giving gesture are lost on what it could do for our relationship. So there really is something important about making what, again, might be more, we know this already. I don't have to ask him. I know what he's going to say. But by putting it more on the table, then when, let's say again, in the situation, he tells you, I really want to have dinner with you at night. Can we try to make that happen once or twice a week? Whatever it is. And then when you make that effort to do it, he's more mindful that you're making that effort. You're more mindful that you're putting something into the relationship that's important to your spouse. And that really can help refuel the relationship by that mindfulness that comes to play. So again, when you can't do it all, what's really important is to really get clarity on what's most important as far as what you're investing in your relationship. And that's what goes on your to-do list. And the other things will go on, as Orly said, the it would be nice if I can list. But getting clarity about what that is in your marriage is so important. Now, if you are the support person in a relationship where your spouse is more of the caregiver, this might seem very obvious, but again, ask how can I be supportive to you? And even though it might seem obvious, I'm keep on stressing some of these points that can seem so obvious, but sometimes it's the obvious things that we don't do and can be so, so important. It really lets your spouse know, I want to be there for you. I know you're going through a lot. And it also will cue you in about what's the priority for your spouse, because maybe as a support person, you might also be strained and you may not be able to do it all. So by your asking that question, it gives you clarity, but it also sends a message to your spouse that when I do that thing you asked me to do, or you shared would really mean a lot to you. It gives so much more energy and koach to that deposit that you're investing in the relationship. Now, I just want to bring in one more important point, even though there's so many, but in the short time that we have, is that oftentimes it's very common for the supporter of the caregiving spouse to feel neglected. And this can oftentimes come into a conversation of tension when it comes up. And it's very painful because it's such a hard place to be when you're the support person and you just want to please everybody and you don't have time for yourself. You don't feel like you're doing the best job for your parent. Don't feel like you're doing the best job in your marriage. And this topic coming up, if your spouse expresses that they're feeling neglected, it really touches an emotional sore spot that can really trigger a lot of pain. So if you are the supportive person in this relationship and you do feel a need to bring up that you're feeling somewhat neglected, I'm going to share a few steps that really should be taken, that oftentimes the first two crucial steps are missed if we just go to the end. And this might make the biggest difference between your sharing what you feel and asking for more presence of your spouse for being able to be accepted in a way that feels supportive as opposed to turning into more pain for yourself and your spouse. So the first thing you really need to do is, I think usually when we are feeling upset, we are very focused on how we feel in ourselves, which is totally normal. That's human. I'm thinking of it from my perspective, how I'm feeling, what I'm going through. So the first two steps are a little bit going outside of our natural response as a human being. And I actually have to sort of think about my spouse more. What are they going through? What's it like for them? And the first step is to think of a genuine compliment you can give to your spouse. And so think about, what are they doing? What do you appreciate? What do you admire? Right? It's incredible how you're taking care of your mother. It's incredible how the other day you had such incredible patience when it was such a challenging situation. Find something that you can genuinely compliment, and that's how you have to start this conversation. The next step is you really have to go into thinking, what is so challenging about this situation for my spouse, and acknowledge it and bring it to the table, right? And this is again, you going outside of how you're feeling the neglect right now, but into the mind space of what's challenging for my spouse. And so really thinking, what's a challenge, right? You have so much on your plate. You have so many appointments you're trying to make half squeeze into a day, and you're trying to work, and you're trying to be there for our kids or grandkids, whatever it is. But again, genuinely going into what is it that your spouse is going through that's challenging. And then this is where people usually start, but only then are you going to address what it is that's going on for you. And here's a big but, or I should say, and. So often we talk about what's we don't like. You're never around. But you have to express it in a desire. What do I want? This is going to make the biggest difference potentially between it being received or creating more pain. So instead of saying, you're never around, we never have time together, how can I turn that around into, what do I want? And so you might really need to think about this before you have this conversation and write it out for yourself. So you can flip that into, I really would like to have more time with you. How could it be possible? I know you're so busy, but is it possible for us to be able to carve out some time so we can have time together? So do you hear how you flipped from what you don't want, which is usually how we express these things? It turns into a fight, an argument, creates more pain. Now you're flipping what you don't want into what you do want. And in that capacity, there's no 100% guarantees it will be received, but that already right there potentially could, instead of creating more pain, could actually be a building block for more connection. So again, there's so much more to cover, but I hope that these tips will be useful in this really challenging yet incredibly special opportunity of caregiving for parents.
Hey, Leora, that was amazing. Leora and I, Bezrat Hashem, we do plan on doing some more content to add to my website on many of these different areas. Unfortunately, she lives locally, and we're going to work on more content to be added that you can access. Anyone who, I see that no questions really came in, and we're really almost at the 1 hour and a half point. So any questions, any feedback, please go to the website, susiebenzaken.com. Put them in there, and the hope is that we're going to develop more content, more resources for people. It could be a place eventually to share, to share our thoughts on the challenges and how we can support each other through this. So please feel free to go to the website. There's also 2 videos up. One, which was mentioned before, a video that we did with Rabbi Zev Leff on the halachot of Kibbud Av V'Em, and also addressing some questions that had come in prior. And there's a video with Rebbitzin Debbie Greenblatt, more on the hashkafa side and how we can embrace this mitzvah. So those 2 videos are up for viewing. I hope that you'll go there and watch them. As always, feedback is always really appreciated. Again, thank you so much for everyone, all my presenters. I have so much hakaras hatov. I really don't know how I can adequately express it. You gave of your time, you prepared, you came, you supported prior to the program and now. There were also a few books that I wanted to recommend. One was that I mentioned by Yehuda Samet, My Father, My Mother, and Me. There was another book that called The Fifth Commandment, and that's by Rabbi Moshe Lieber, who was recently nifter. So this was one of the starting books in English that can give us kind of support and understanding of the mitzvah of Kibbud Av V'Em. And then there's another book called Honor Them and Revere Them. and that's by Rabbi Shimon Finkelman and Rabbi Zachariah Wallerstein. And they're all great resources. I hope everybody will give some feedback so we know where to go and how we can build more programming that can be helpful for everyone. So thank you very much. Also, there were some questions that did come in, but they came in a little bit too close to the program to be able to bring someone in to address them, but they will be, Bezrat Hashem, addressed in future programming.